Alrighty, chat, let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing? How many of y'all can say this is your first stream? Certainly ain't my first stream. This is like my 300th stream. But for those of y'all that are new, welcome everybody. So today, we're just going to be chilling, chat, and we can kind of chill as long as y'all want, basically. So we've got a bunch of questions we're going to go through, but yeah, we're just kind of like, I'm going to be taking some time off to do various things at the end of the month. So we're actually going to be streaming every day this week and most days next week. I don't know about a 24-hour stream, but we can go for a couple hours for sure. So, yeah. So we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. We've got good posts and stuff. We're going to cover a couple things that we haven't discussed much. So that'll be good. 48-hour stream. No, we're going to stream every day. And in order for me to stream tomorrow, I need to sleep today. We will be talking a lot about sleep, though. Not directly, but indirectly. How are y'all doing, chat? Go sleep? Yeah, healthy gamer sleep stream? Sure. We can sleep. Okay. Oh no, Super Kami Grayson got some heartbreaking news. I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. We're not going to be talking about sleep hygiene, because sleep hygiene is boring. And we're on Twitch. And so, along with certain TOS violating terms, discussion of hygiene is explicitly banned. Yeah, so tomorrow we're streaming, Thursday we're streaming, and Friday with Destiny. That is correct. I think we are going to have a conversation with Destiny about cognitive performance. I think. I have never done a 24-hour stream. The closest I've ever done to that is a 24-hour AMA, in which I did an AMA for like 20 hours. And then, of course, I've been on call for like 30 hours. Can't talk about hygiene? No. I was kidding. We can absolutely talk about hygiene. Friday is Destiny. Yes. We're going to be talking to Destiny this Friday. And we're going to be talking about cognitive performance and stimulants and learning a little bit about that stuff. Yeah, so today is World Mental Health Day. And so every day is a little bit of a mental health day here at Healthy Gamer. That's what we do. We do mental health. And what happens, though, is the rest of the world decides that one day out of the year, we are going to focus on our mental health. So that is interesting, and we're grateful for it. So y'all do something to take care of your mental health today. I don't know that we're going to do anything particularly special, except the fact that we are streaming, and we're going to cover a lot of questions that people usually ask that we haven't touched on. So we're going to be talking about caffeine. We're going to be talking about nicotine. We're going to be talking about alcohol and the effect of all of these substances on things like cognitive development. We will also talk about things like social isolation and why it is hard to make friends and why you don't like hanging out with people. And then you feel lonely, so then you go hang out with people, and then you don't like it, so you leave, and then you're kind of bouncing back and forth between loneliness and frustration with other humans. We're also going to understand a little bit of neuroscience, of how we can get stuck not understanding other people and lacking empathy. Okay? We're just going to cover the whole shebang. And then the other thing that I guess we may wax poetic on is our approach to mental health. So I know that today is World Mental Health Day and everyone is talking about mental health. So let me start by just sharing with y'all some ideas that I have about mental health. Number one, mental health is more than the treatment of mental illness. So I think right now, if you are struggling with something, the default answer that a lot of people will give is go see a therapist. And that is a very good answer. It is something that I appreciate a lot. One of the things that I found, though, when I was practicing psychiatry full time is that I found that like I could help my patients in the office, right? So I would do like psychotherapy with them once a week, let's say. But then what I really found is that a lot of them, like, their problems were not necessarily to be fixed in the office. So I had one patient, for example, who just didn't have a very good life. And so we could go, like, he would come to my office every week and we would like try therapizing him a little bit. Like, tell me about why you're depressed. Tell me what makes you sad. And then we'd talk about his sad feelings. And then the hour would end and he would go home. And next week he would come in and we would talk about his sad feelings. And then he would go home. And next week he would come in, and we did this for a couple months. And I was like, bro, do you feel like you're getting better? And he was like, no, not really. And I was like, well, what do you think we should do about that? And he's like, I don't know. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. And I was like, that's a good point. What do you think you're supposed to do? And he's like, I'm supposed to come here and talk about my feelings. That's what therapy is. And I was like, yes. And I talked to my supervisors about it, and they were like, yeah, you got to talk about the feelings better. And I was like, okay, let me try that. After working with this guy for a while, I ultimately decided that sometimes, like, people need help outside of therapy. And so the reason we built HG, like so many years ago, 40 years ago, I had a choice. I could become a academic full-time and stay in the hospital and see patients and develop cognitive behavioral therapy protocols for things like video game addiction. But what I really learned after talking to tons and tons of gamers is that y'all don't necessarily need help within a therapeutic setting, which you could do, which is fine. So by all means, go see a therapist. But that a lot of times we need help with other stuff. We need help understanding how we work as human beings. We need help building skills. We need help understanding what is going on within us. And I also sort of stumbled into one of the chief of psychiatry at McLean Hospital suggested I check out this concept of coaching. And I was like, what is that? Is that BS? And he was like, no, you should definitely check it out. And what we sort of discovered is that we can take everything we understand about psychology, and instead of using it to fix something that is broken, we can use that methodology to help people create something that is good. So this is the field of positive psychology and things like motivational interviewing, which that is correct. You guessed it, is a specific way to interview someone to increase their motivation. There is a science behind it. And so we built this along with our Twitch stream, our YouTube channel. We started doing deep dives, marathon streams to educate the public. We also started doing interviews because watching someone else go through a problem, it turns out can actually help you because you are not biased when you are watching someone else go through a problem. You can see everything as clear as day, even though they can't see it. This, by the way, is part of the reason that we developed group coaching, because this core principle that it's easier to do replay analysis and figure out what's wrong than it is to play a game and simultaneously correct your behavior. It's way easier to correct your behavior when it is externalized than when you are struggling with it yourself. I know it sounds kind of weird. So we leverage that in group coaching towards shared problem solving. We also have built things that are designed to help people with the struggles of the mental health era that we're in today. This includes things like social atrophy. So we have programs like this Thursday, for example, we're going to have a social sandbox on our Discord server. Social sandbox is awesome. It's a place that we go to practice social skills. Because as we move more towards digital communication, there are parts of our brain that atrophies a little bit and we get rusty. The problem is that if you try to go build skills by yourself, it is anxiety inducing. Oh my God, these people will think I am creepy. So we've tried to create spaces for y'all to come and practice your social skills. So I think we're going to be talking about male mental health this Thursday. We've got Ask a Coach, not Social Sandbox. So for those of y'all that are interested in learning more about how a coach would approach problems, and I think the topic is going to be male mental health this Thursday, definitely check that out. And in general, like our coaching program is solid. Like we got featured at the American Psychiatric Association this year for being an innovator in mental health. We see good outcomes, about a 25 to 45% reduction in depression and anxiety. But it's not a clinical treatment, so it's not a substitute for therapy. And then people may wonder, well, how does it improve mental health if it does not treat mental illness? And that circles back to our core approach to mental health, which is that it is more than the treatment of mental illness. There are things that make you more mentally healthy that are not things that we do that are not sick care. Right? So becoming healthy and treating sickness are two different things. And what I sort of found as a psychiatrist is that there's a lack of emphasis in today's day and age around mental health. Everyone's focused on mental illness, which is exactly why we see conditions like burnout skyrocketing, because burnout is not a mental illness. It is a lack of healthy behaviors in terms of our mind. So when we have a lack of mental health, we result in burnout. All right? When we don't know how to set boundaries, we don't know how to take care of ourselves, we don't know how to limit our exposure to a particular job. And the number one cause of burnout, trying really hard and not getting anything in return. Okay? So if y'all are interested, definitely check out everything that we do. Everything from coaching to group coaching. We've also, by the way, expanded our coaching program into a couple of different things. We have a creator coaching program. We have a career coaching program, which also is targeted towards the problems that we saw in our community, which is everything from climbing the corporate ladder to being a freelancer to how do I have this difficult conversation with my biggest client about why they don't pay their invoices on time. So we've tried to tackle all the modern problems of career, which are not just like simply climbing the corporate ladder. So today's day and age, what y'all need to develop a healthy sense of yourself and develop professionally is like more nuanced and complicated than just go to work every day, work really hard, and you will be rewarded. That doesn't work the way that it used to. So we need a new skill set. So our coaches, we also have a fair number of trauma-informed coaches, and our coaches work a lot with ADHD. And so I think we have a subgroup of our population that is really focused on that stuff. So check out all that stuff. We also have resource packs, which are free collections of sort of like key resources that HG has put together to address a particular topic that we do not have guides for. So we already also have Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health, which includes a depression module, an anxiety module, a meditation module, and an ADHD module. So y'all can check that stuff out too. Do you think burnout will eventually be in the DSM? Absolutely. It is a condition for further study, and it is too big of a deal to not be included in the DSM. Hot Sauce Hex says, guide is so good. I am so glad you enjoyed it. That's why we built it for people like you. Is a trauma module planned? Sort of, is the answer. Yeah. Okay, cool, Rikai. Faf says, guide is amazing. I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. Dr. K, what are your research interests? Whatever. Oh, man, so many things. Yeah, so many things. Okay. Is it available to Europeans? Absolutely. So coaching is international. We have clients in like 120 countries, by the way, which is super cool. So very accessible to everybody. Guide is also international as well. Resource packs are absolutely international. Side of the guide seems to be down. Womp, womp, womp. Okay. Is this kind of a Q&A stream? Yeah, but let's hop into a post. Let's talk about stuff, chat. All right. Okay. Let's talk about... Oh, nope. Looking for a game to capture. All right. What's the effect of caffeine on the brain in the long term? How safe is the consumption of caffeine to one's health? So this is a great question. You know, we talk about a lot of substances. We talk about alcohol. We talk about nowadays marijuana. And there are lots of people who are super, super pro marijuana. And people are also exploring things like psychedelics. But there are some substances that have, generally speaking, been legal all over the world, have never been criminalized, have never been considered drugs of abuse, and are still very psychoactive. And caffeine is number one on the list. I think 90% of people in America, I think, use caffeine of some kind on a daily basis, 90% of adults. So it's staggeringly widespread. And a lot of people wonder, okay, what are the impacts of caffeine? Because we do develop a tolerance to it. So there are a couple of things to understand. The first is that the data on caffeine is mixed. There are a lot of studies that show that caffeine has health benefits, can do things like reduce the risk of dementia, can increase like all kinds of cardiovascular kind of outcomes. There's good evidence that shows that a moderate amount of caffeine on a daily basis is somewhat healthy for our longevity and mental health. But we also know that caffeine can be damaging for especially developing brains. And this is where I'd say if you're trying to figure out, okay, what should I do about my caffeine intake? Number one thing to understand is that the earlier you start using caffeine in brain development, the greater the chance is that you will have some kind of harmful effect. So our brain develops until we're about the age of 27, 28. For those of y'all who started at the age of 16, GG. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad. Let's understand, okay? But if you want to, if you're trying to figure out what is the healthiest way to use caffeine, I would say start after the age of 28. Because what we know about caffeine is that it tends to protect against neurodegeneration that happens later in life, okay? But what we know about caffeine is that when you take it very early, so for example, if we look at studies of prenatal caffeine exposure, so fetuses that are in the uteri of pregnant women who get a large exposure to caffeine have certain changes to their brain. So a couple of the things that we see are decreased kind of efficacy of the frontal lobes. So these are babies that will sometimes have difficulty with self-regulation. So we know that caffeine and prenatal exposure sort of tampers with our frontal lobes. We also know that it tampers with our reward circuitry. So people, the most interesting thing is that early caffeine exposure, the most clear danger that we see to that, or excessive caffeine exposure during the developing brain, actually has to do with your weight, your sugar metabolism, and your binge eating behaviors. So we know that caffeine is an appetite suppressant. And so when you have an appetite suppressant in the brain, in a developing brain, like a fetus, or even a young child, it tampers with our sugar metabolism. So like when we start suppressing appetite, we feel less hungry. As we feel less hungry, we eat less food. As we eat less food, our energy balance starts to dip. As our energy balance dips, a compensatory action happens in the body. Our body is like, hey, we've run out of energy. We need to eat more calorie-dense foods. We need to eat foods that give us a lot of energy really quickly because the caffeine has caused us to fall behind on our food, on our caloric intake for the day. So what we actually see is that the more caffeine that you ingest prenatally, the more likely your child is to develop obesity, the more likely your child is to have problems with their blood sugar. And what we see sort of cognitively is an increased susceptibility to cravings for food. So what's really interesting is that if you are trying to figure out, like if you're trying to think about, okay, what problems does caffeine cause? Most of the problems that we actually see have to do around diet and sugar. So paradoxically, one thing you can really think about is if you're having trouble eating a healthy diet and are vulnerable to highly processed foods with a very high nutrient density, there is a chance that cutting back on your caffeine will help you with that. On the flip side, we also know that for people who are intermittent fasting, for example, they will recommend caffeine intake early on in the morning or even into the afternoon to make it easier to tolerate that sort of fasting window, right? So if you're doing something like 18-6 and you're awake for like 8-10 hours a day without eating, caffeine can really be a useful appetite stimulant in that way. But I'd say that the primary problem that caffeine causes has to do with like making it difficult for us to regulate our blood sugar, our sense of hunger, and our cravings. The other big thing that we see with caffeine is that it interferes with sleep. So the second main problem with caffeine has nothing to do with necessarily brain development, but a lot of the problems that we see with caffeine have to do with the way that it interferes with sleep. And this isn't just falling asleep. This is also what it does to our sleep architecture while we sleep. So people who have higher levels of caffeine are more likely to have less restful sleep. We don't really have great data on what exactly it does or what the chances are, but this is just kind of my observation, is that even having caffeine first thing in the morning, for some people, will affect the restfulness of their sleep at night. So we can also get into this really interesting problem where caffeine keeps us kind of artificially awake, which means that our brain is fatigued from excessive use, but we have so much artificial stimulation from the caffeine that we are not able to fall asleep. And what this creates is what I would call the zombie window. So the zombie window is when you are too caffeinated to go to sleep, but you are too mentally exhausted to make good decisions. And what this kind of results in is a period of time, usually between 2 and 4 hours, between like 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Somewhere in there is usually what we're talking about. Maybe 10 o'clock, maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m., somewhere in that 11 to 1 window is really where the major part of it is, where you're too tired to actually do anything productive. And since your brain is disinhibited and you've run out of willpower for the day, you end up doing stupid shit like being on your phone or whatever, or like playing video games or ordering things online or like buying stocks, right? And this is kind of interesting. So there was a major trader that was just betting against everyone who did stock trades like at 2 a.m. So a major trader realized that all these like retail traders, so people are downloading these apps like Robinhood, and they realized that people make stupid decisions like after midnight. So there's a major clearinghouse that was like, any noob who is using an app who purchases anything after midnight, we're just going to take the opposite end of the bet. Whatever they want to buy, we're willing to sell it. And they made a ton of money because they were correct that people make stupid decisions when they're mentally fatigued. And this is the problem of caffeine, is that it doesn't allow us to fall asleep, but extends this window of kind of bad behavior. So then what happens is we wake up the next day and we're tired because we didn't sleep enough, because the caffeine was floating around in our brain. And then we are groggy. And when we are tired and groggy, what do we drink first thing in the morning? We drink caffeine. And so this is also important to understand. The way that caffeine boosts our energy is not by boosting our energy. The way that caffeine makes us feel more energized is by blocking adenosine receptors. So adenosine is the waste product from something called ATP, which is a general energy molecule in our body. It's like the most basic form of energy that we have. So really what you're doing is you're not actually improving your energy, you're just blocking the fatigue signal. So when you get dependent on caffeine, what happens is that you are functionally impaired because you're fatigued. You're like not at 100% by any means, but your brain tricks you into thinking you've got energy, which is how we enter the zombie state of like, I can't fall asleep and I don't really feel like doing anything, but I don't actually have a functioning brain that is like able to enter the flow state. So these are the problems that I tend to see with caffeine. Number one is it messes with our sugar balance and our hunger and our cravings and our ability to binge eat and things like that. It really tampers with that. Second thing that we tend to see is this weird stuff around falling asleep and not being able to fall asleep and like messing with our REM sleep so we're tired the next day. And then we also develop caffeine dependence. So in the absence of caffeine, we feel very groggy and tired. And so those are the problems. Now, like I said, there's a fair amount of evidence that shows that caffeine is also neuroprotective against dementia. Moderate amounts, usually 1 cup of coffee a day or tea or something like that, is probably on balance healthy for you, is my guess. But we also have to remember that when you drink coffee or tea, or you are getting way more than caffeine. You're also getting antioxidants, you're getting all kinds of like bitter stuff, and you know, you've got different stuff in like green tea that is helpful, like theophylline, I think is in green tea as well. And theophylline is even a medication that we use for people who have asthma, used to, that will like open up their airways. So there are all kinds of interesting benefits around cardiovascular health, respiratory health, brain health. But you got to watch out. Right, so friend of me is asking, is it caffeine or coffee that's protective? Can I take a caffeine pill and get the same benefits? Chances are coffee is far more protective than a caffeine pill. So there's also something else to understand about most psychoactive natural compounds. So if you look at the difference between a caffeine pill and something like coffee, coffee has antioxidants, may have other compounds that are stimulants. Like theophylline is a good example. I don't know if theophylline's in coffee, but it's definitely in green tea. So you'll have a variety of different psychoactive compounds in a natural plant-based form. The interesting thing is that most plants that are psychoactive actually have compounds that do both. So in the case of, for example, marijuana, we know that there are compounds that can increase psychosis or even a sensation of anxiety. And there are compounds that can decrease psychosis and a sensation of anxiety. And in baseline marijuana, we have both. So what tends to happen when we create artificial marijuana, so we had a bad outbreak of this in Boston back in like 2010, 2012. I don't know if it's still a problem up there, but of something called K2, which is artificial marijuana. And boy, did people get fucking psychotic off of K2, like all the time. Like every day I was in the emergency room, someone is like flooredly psychotic. So one thing that tends to happen is anytime we purify something and remove it from its plant compound, we really escalate the biological effect. And frequently we'll tip it out of balance. Now, we use this therapeutically when we're using drugs like aspirin and cholesterol medications and things like that. But generally speaking, when you remove caffeine out of something, I think it's going to be more likely to be harmful than balanced. Does this concept apply to purified water? I don't think so, because water is not a psychoactive compound. Right? Water actually doesn't have any psychoactive compounds. Okay. Questions? We're just doing what's on the agenda today, Alpha Cat. We're doing a string of different topics on substances, socializing, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so people are asking a question about yerba mate. So for a little while, I think people were saying that yerba mate contains a compound called matine, which my understanding is that it's just caffeine, but I could be wrong there. It's kind of a different perspective. But yeah, yerba mate is a really good example of something that contains a whole slew of psychoactive compounds that are probably on balance healthier for you than more harmful. Dasi, who's saying, hey, Dr. K, any advice to psychiatry residents who are interested in your clinical approach? Absolutely. Sign up for our HGI mailing list. So this is another big thing that we focused on over the course of the last year. So a lot of people are kind of wondering what we're up to. But we don't just do stuff on stream. So we've gotten, more and more requests from different healthcare providers to teach various things. So we did a workshop just a couple weeks ago with a national mental health provider here in the United States. So they have over 100 clinics. So we're teaching their therapists. So we are teaching our approach. We're an American Psychological Association approved continuing education provider. We also have CMEs with the American Psychiatric Association. So a big part of what we've been doing is we've sort of realized that in addition to trying to help y'all directly through things like streaming and lectures and stuff like that, we've got stuff like our coaching program, which is also designed to help people sort of build the life that they want. And then the other big thing that we started this year is we're educating providers. So we're educating therapists and stuff on topics like video game addiction and also just our approach. So we had, for example, our inaugural kind of test course on meditation at HGI. So we'll probably be doing another one at some point. So check out HGI and sign up for whatever, and that's the Healthy Gamer Institute. Okay. I wish Healthy Gamer would give me civil engineering CEUs. So that's great. We could absolutely do that because I think that there's probably something in the CEU continuing education for engineering that has to do with burnout and mental health. It's entering every topic. I was doing some stuff at Harvard Business School, and if it's over there, eventually it's going to make it out into everything. Okay. All right, let's take a look at our next question. Was that good? All right. Next up. What are the long-term effects of casual alcohol consumption, for example, 3 to 5 drinks per week, and how do the effects differ from alcoholism or heavy drinking? So, let's talk a little bit about booze. So there are some studies that show that up to 2 drinks per week, 2 alcoholic beverages per week, can be beneficial for mental health. So there are some studies out there that really talk about health benefits of alcohol. Now, my take on those studies is that they have something called a confounding factor. And what a confounding factor is something that is associated with the alcohol, which is responsible for the benefit, but is not the alcohol itself. So a simple example is if you look at, for example, if I were to do a study on people who own cat food and mental health outcomes, I could do a study and I could ask you, do you own cat food? And if the answer is yes, how depressed are you? How anxious are you? And what we would find is in this study, people who own cat food have lower levels of depression and anxiety. Does that mean that owning cat food lowers your levels of depression and anxiety? Absolutely not. What lowers your levels of depression and anxiety is the cat that comes with the cat food. This is what I think the problem is with health benefit studies on alcohol. Is what they're really picking up is not the alcohol itself. It is what does someone's life look like when they have 2 drinks a week? This is the important question. What does their day look like? So someone who has 2 drinks a week, 3 drinks a week, usually correlates with a healthy amount of social activity. I'm going to go to a cocktail hour after work, some kind of networking event. I'm going to have 2 drinks. My friend has a birthday next week. I'm going to have a couple glasses of wine. We're going to have a good time. We're celebrating a promotion. I'm going to have a few glasses of champagne. So in my opinion, the health benefits of alcohol primarily come from the associated activities and not the alcohol itself. Okay, so this is the first thing to understand. Next thing to understand is we have to understand what alcohol does to you. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the acute effects of alcohol. So if we're looking at someone who drinks 5 drinks one night versus 1 drink a day, how is that different? So alcohol has an acute effect as something called a CNS, which means central nervous system depressant. Slows down our central nervous system. Now, for some people, this has a anxiety relieving effect. We get disinhibited. Literally, our mind slows down. And when our mind slows down, one of the things that slows down are our anxious thoughts. So if we look at anxiety, anxiety is a mind that moves very, very fast. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. And alcohol slows the whole process down. So it helps people feel less anxious. The problem is that may happen over the short term. And there's also some evidence or good data that suggests that while it reduces anxiety, when we slow down our mind, we also open the door to depression. So people who get drunk may feel less anxious, but if you leave them alone for a little while, they're going to start to get real sad. And then they'll start crying, and then they'll start feeling regret and all this kind of stuff. Okay? So that's the first thing, the acute effect of alcohol. Reduces anxiety, disinhibits us, makes us feel more depressed. Next thing to understand is that alcohol, acutely or chronically, doesn't really matter, interferes with our sleep cycles, which means that if you have a drink, and then some people will use alcohol to fall asleep. So let's understand why people use alcohol to fall asleep and what the problems are. Alcohol helps people go to sleep because it slows down our mind. It is a CNS depressant, which means it slows down our central nervous system. Once our central nervous system is slowed down, our anxious thoughts, our mind slows down, those calm down, and we are able to fall asleep. Because when we go to sleep, what happens? All of the anxiety comes flooding up. The anxiety that we've been suppressing all day long now suddenly comes up because it has nothing to suppress it. So alcohol protects against that. The problem is that even though alcohol helps us fall asleep, it decreases the quality of our sleep and it makes us more likely to wake up earlier. I know it sounds absolutely bizarre, but early morning awakening is very common with excessive alcohol use. Okay, I'm not recommending it to get up on time because you'll feel like crap. And then the quality of sleep you have also goes down, which means you're going to wake up the next day feeling tired. So this is a big problem that people with booze get into, which is it helps me fall asleep, but it makes my sleep crappy. So you're kind of stuck in this cycle of being tired the next day. And since you're fatigued, you drink caffeine. And since you drink a lot of caffeine, your mind is hyperactive. And then you need something to kind of help you calm down at night, and you can get stuck in this cycle. The third effect of alcohol on mental health is that as we drink alcohol more chronically, more regularly, our body starts to adapt. So since we constantly have a CNS depressant on board, which is calming us down, chilling us out a little bit, our nervous system ramps up to compensate. Okay? As the nervous system ramps up to compensate, we get something called rebound anxiety. There's a whole lecture on this in Dr. K's Guide to Anxiety, by the way. So rebound anxiety is the body's compensation to the CNS depressant. If you're turning down the volume artificially with alcohol, we're going to jack up the volume from the phone. So you're controlling it on the speaker. I'm going to jack up the source. And so then what happens is in the absence of alcohol, this is more chronically, by the way, in the absence of alcohol, our anxiety increases. And once our anxiety increases, then what do we do to soothe it? We drink. Calms it down. Then we become dependent on alcohol. The last problem that we tend to see a lot with alcohol, a lot of people will get really confused because they'll say like, okay, how long does it take to heal from alcohol? If I've been drinking for 10 years, what can I expect? So here's what I've seen as an addiction psychiatrist. First couple weeks are going to be rough because your body is detoxing off of the alcohol and you're reversing those kind of changes and that kind of dependency on the alcohol. First couple weeks are going to be rough. A month in, people will start to feel better. Their mood will start to improve. But even 3 months or 6 months after you stop drinking alcohol, you will see big benefits in your mood and your general function. And then the question becomes, why is this? Why is it that 6 months out, after I haven't had a drink for 6 months, I feel significantly better? And that's because of the third major thing that alcohol does. So if you look at studies of alcohol, the major effect on the brain is damaging white matter. So if you look at alcohol-induced dementia, it is the white matter of our brain that gets affected by alcohol. And what does that mean? It's a white matter dementia. So we have two kinds of stuff in our brain. We have gray matter, which is like the substance of our brain, okay? And then those are like neurons. And then we have this stuff called white matter, which is the insulation or the support structure for the neurons. So we have the neurons themselves, and then we have all the stuff that takes care of the neurons. So you can sort of think about a garden that has a bunch of different plants. Those are the neurons. And then you have the gardener, you have the trellis, you have the fertilizer, you have the sprinklers. That's all white matter. It's the stuff that takes care of the neurons. So what we know about alcohol is that it damages the white matter. And people who drink a lot will develop a white matter dementia later in life. So the dementia is not caused by direct damage to neurons, it's caused by damage to the cells that take care of the neurons. So 3 months out, 6 months out, this is when the white matter regenerates, is my guess. So it takes that long to heal that damage. The good news is that white matter, generally speaking, can regenerate. So our neurons don't divide and grow, which is why traumatic brain injuries can be close to permanent, right? So if my brain gets damaged, like the brain doesn't heal very much. It doesn't replace that tissue. The good news is white matter tissue can be replaced. It's constantly growing and like building new stuff, right? Just like a garden, really hard to replace a tree, but if a sprinkler breaks, I can just replace the sprinkler, not a big deal. So what we know about alcohol is that it causes damage to white matter probably in 3 different ways. The first is that it alters cerebral blood flow. So it reduces the level of blood flow to your brain. And the problem is that in your brain, the blood flow prioritizes the gray matter. So if I have 1 liter of blood flowing to my brain, then like 80 or 90% of it is going to go to the neurons, and like 10 to 20% of it is going to go to the white matter. I don't know if those numbers are precisely correct, but we absolutely know that capillary density in white matter is way smaller than capillary density near neurons. So our brain takes care of the neurons before it takes care of the white matter. So if we reduce cerebral blood flow, the first thing to actually run out of blood in, not like run out of blood like stroke level, but like have reduced blood flow is going to be the white matter, which is what causes the degradation over time. Okay? So when we drink, it alters cerebral blood flow. The second thing that it does is changes our blood-brain barrier. So blood-brain barrier is the protective sheath around our brain that keeps the toxins from the rest of this crap out of here. So when we drink a lot, it decreases the integrity of the blood-brain barrier and can lead to things like greater inflammation and greater invasion from like toxins and other crap into our brain. So alcohol damages that. The good news is that even though people may feel kind of sad or depressed or whatever, the white matter stuff basically recovers. Now, here's the last thing that I'll share with y'all. So I've noticed something that white matter disease is a little bit different, or white matter impairment is a little bit different from gray matter impairment. When we damage a particular neuron, right? So let's say I get like a traumatic brain injury. I'm in a car accident, a part of my brain gets damaged. I lose whatever function that is, or that function gets impaired. So one good example is an aphasia. An aphasia is inability to speak. So if I damage this part of my brain called Broca's area, it will be difficult for my brain to speak because the part of my brain that runs that program is damaged. What we tend to see in white matter is what allows different parts of the brain to communicate. So it isn't one function, one particular thing that's damaged. It's our ability, the brain's ability to coordinate different parts to successfully do something that gets impaired when you use alcohol. So I'll give you all a simple example of this. A lot of the people that I work with alcohol, their IQ appears intact. They can technically do things just as well as they used to. There's no real change in their IQ. What changes, though, is when they try to do that task, if it requires using a different part of their brain, they struggle with it. So you may say, what does that mean? That means that I can do math, but if I'm working on a group project that simultaneously requires empathy or simultaneously requires emotional regulation, then they struggle. So what I've found is that people who use alcohol have a lot of difficulty multitasking their brain. I don't mean multitasking in terms of their work. I mean, if you're trying to focus on your work and you're trying to regulate your emotions at the same time, it's really hard. If you're trying to find the motivation to work and concentrate at the same time, it's really hard. What it does is makes our brain one-dimensional. This is just what I've observed clinically. And there's even evidence that shows that when we have white matter problems, what gets damaged is the connections between different parts of our brain. So for example, if I'm trying to concentrate, concentration requires a strong connection between my frontal lobes and my hippocampus. This is what directs our mind. This is where we feel emotions. So we need a very strong connection between these two things so that the controller can shut off or regulate whatever emotions are happening. What I tend to see with people who have alcohol problems, and this is what we sort of know, there's studies about this, that show that the difficulty they have with emotional regulation comes around because of these white matter changes. So what I tend to find is that what's going to happen with long-term alcohol use is you won't be able to some people are able to do everything all at once. Like I can be at a party and be anxious and have a conversation about one thing and also manage this at the same time. My brain is able to integrate the different parts of itself to regulate, to feel emotions, to tone down emotions or ramp up emotions, to be socially and empathically active while I'm being analytically active. This is what I tend to see as a problem with people with alcohol. So they become very fragile in terms of the environment they require to function successfully. And when we stop using alcohol and that white matter starts to repair itself 3 months out, 6 months out, people just feel more motivated, they feel more calm, they feel more empathic. A lot of good stuff happens. So basically what we're talking about with acute versus chronic alcohol use is acute use is going to create all kinds of temporary effects, which can include things that are lethal, by the way. And then chronic use, you can also withdrawal from alcohol is lethal. So if y'all are thinking about stopping alcohol, you should talk to a medical professional. But chronic stuff over time can change completely the way that your brain functions because that white matter is impaired. And once the white matter is impaired, you cannot coordinate different parts of your brain, which means you'll be fine if you're only doing one thing, but you'll struggle if you have to use different parts. Okay, questions? Chaliks, I may have found the single reason for 99% of mental illnesses nobody knows about. Yeah, post on our subreddit, my friend. We love to hear. How do you stay sane thinking about mental health all the time? The object of what your mind focuses on and the state of your mind are two different things. Does that make sense? Like, I find it fascinating. I've gotten brain damage from head trauma. Can it heal? The answer is probably, or maybe. I don't know the details of your particular case, but let's understand something. So while the damage itself may not heal, we don't know, just depends on what the damage was and to what extent it is. The good news is that even if it doesn't heal, our brain is really, really, really good at compensating. So I once had a patient, not my patient, but one of my supervisor's patients, who lost a leg from the knee down. So they had a below the knee amputation after a traumatic injury. So they had one full leg and they had another leg that ended at the knee. So something really interesting happens. When you lose that part of the leg, there is a part of your brain that maps onto the leg. So we have a part of our brain that is kind of like devoted to the leg, and all the signals from the leg go into one part of our brain. So our brain kind of knows, okay, this is the leg portion of the brain. Something really interesting happened. Once that real estate was no longer used by the leg, a different body part went in and occupied it. Can anyone guess what the body part was? If you guessed clitoris, you are correct. So this person, the part of their brain that governed their clitoris, actually like occupied this part of the somatosensory cortex. Which means that this person, when someone rubbed the stump of their knee, they could have an orgasm. So this is the adaptability and plasticity of your brain. So if you are worried that you've damaged a part of your brain, can you fix it? Generally speaking, neurons do not regenerate. If you're a child, it's a different story. The good news is you may not need it to regenerate, and that your brain is really, really good at like accommodating, right? So we can, if I'm right-handed and something happens to my hand, I can learn to be left-handed. That is your brain rewiring. So even though you can't fix it, you can usually rewire around it in some way. And so you can recover a fair amount of function. I might just take the 50-50 and cut my leg off. I would not recommend it because remember, this is case reportable. 99% of people who have amputations do not get mapping on to their genital regions, but it is possible. Okay, so we've got a question about SSRIs and medications. That's good. Why is my sound so muffled? I don't know. My mic sucks, I guess. I don't know. Okay, questions about what are my thoughts about drinking guidelines? So the World Health Organization recently put out a statement that suggested no amount of alcohol is healthy. Like zero amount of alcohol is what we know to be healthy. So that's, on the one hand, a kind of controversial statement. I think it's probably on balance true. I think that, you know, if you really look at like historically, why did alcohol become such a good thing? It's because alcohol was protected against illness. Like back when water was contaminated. So sometimes it was like healthier to drink beer or wine or safer from like a GI perspective than it was to drink water. And I think as our water has gotten cleaner, chances are alcohol has gotten less healthy. Okay. Let's talk. So I see some people have questions about medications. I think we've got a question here. Okay. So let's take a quick look at these. Oh, whoops. Is it possible for antidepressant meds to permanently alter one's neurochemistry and or cognition? And is it worse for your brain to take antidepressants or have severe depression? All right, so let's talk a little bit about antidepressants and depression. So there are some cases in which we are very, very, very careful with the medications that we administer to patients. Generally speaking, we should always be careful. But the one population in which we are usually the most careful is with pregnant people. So when we're dealing with a pregnancy, we know that the sensitivity of the fetal development is so sensitive that medications can have drastic effects. So for example, lithium is a common medication we use for bipolar disorder, which is generally speaking well tolerated and can cause kidney damage over many, many years, but short-term usually doesn't damage anything. But if we give it to a pregnant woman who has a child that has a developing heart, it can lead to heart defects. So like this is what we're super careful about. So that being said, there have been a number of studies that will look at, should you stop your antidepressant in pregnancy? Because does it mess with fetal development, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that we know is that SSRI risk is associated with autism in pregnancy. So what that means is that if you're on an SSRI, it doubles your risk for having a child that is autistic. Now that sounds super scary, but I think that we have to look at the numbers to really understand, okay? So sometimes people are kind of manipulative with headlines and things like that. One of the things to keep in mind is what is the risk of having a child with autism if you have a condition that requires SSRIs? So if you have depression or bipolar disorder or anxiety, does that increase the risk in and of itself? That's question number one. The second thing to keep in mind is that I think 98 to 99% of people who are on SSRIs will have a child who is not autistic, and about 95 to 99% of children who are on the spectrum were born to parents who are not taking SSRIs, right? So even though it doubles the risk, the absolute number is quite small in terms of what it causes. So one way to sort of think about it is, and we sort of have figured this out, that generally speaking, not treating mental illness sufficiently is oftentimes just as damaging or more damaging than whatever the side effects of the medication are. There are a lot of caveats to that because a lot of medication is damaging in pregnancy and stuff, so we want to steer clear of it. So 80% of our repertoire is out of the window. But for that remaining 20%, generally speaking, it can be a good idea to stay on it. So one thing that we really have to understand about medication is that the medication can cause some problems, but having a untreated illness for some amount of time can actually be more damaging than the side effects of the medication. And the jury is out on what really the long-term effects of SSRI usage are. There are some people, like we had a great interview with Dr. Horowitz, strongly recommend y'all check that out. He's doing a lot of really, really awesome revolutionary research in the realm of depression and SSRIs. So some people like Dr. Horowitz think that SSRIs should basically never be used, is the vibe that I got, and that they're on balance way more damaging than helpful, right? There are other organizations, like you can look at the American Psychiatric Association, for example, that is in favor of the use of SSRIs. You know, they think it's totally fine. Most medical establishments are okay with SSRI use. And the short answer is we really don't know what the long-term effects are. A lot of people have a lot of theories. But I think the key thing for you to understand is that, are there some long-term effects? Probably. But generally speaking, the medications are safe and well tolerated according to the majority of evidence that I have seen. So we know, for example, that SSRIs will even have some helpful things that they do. So one method through which they probably facilitate healing is they increase the level of something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is SSRIs will lead to more neurogenesis, or the birth of new neurons and growing new neurons, which is probably part of the way that they work. And this is part of the reason that they also take 3 to 6 weeks to like really kick in, because it's not the direct effect on serotonin. It's something that's going on with like release of BDNF, which is inducing neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and other kinds of things. We don't really know how they work. We don't really know what the long-term effects are. So I think the real question, and this is why we sort of recommend that y'all talk to a doctor, is it's up to you and your doctor to decide, okay, what is it costing me to be depressed for a year or 2 years? What are the risks of starting a medication? What are the short-term risks, long-term risks? What's my plan overall? So generally speaking, if someone comes into my office and is quite ill, I'm okay starting them on antidepressant medication, but then I usually have a plan in place to talk about, or not, to always talk about what is the duration of this medication. Right? So it's important to think about that. And sometimes, like, I don't think this is a good idea where people just start a medication, they just stay on it for like 20 years without someone like reevaluating whether you really need this or not. Okay, questions? Yeah, so I feel like I've been given SSRIs by general practitioners so that I would go away and stop being depressed, because psychiatry here is overloaded and there are far from enough therapists or psychologists to deal with all the depressed people. So giving people SSRI and pretending like that solves it is the main strategy. That, I think, is an absolutely fair take. So I think that the advantage of SSRIs are effective for a population, right? So this is where, and that even is debatable. You can argue against that statement. But I think that if you've got, 100 people who are depressed and you do not have time to help them put together their lives, take a pill, right? For a third of them, it's not going to do anything. For a third of them, it may help some. And for a third of them, it'll help significantly. But this is exactly the problem with psychiatry, is that it's overloaded. And then somewhere along the way, we decided that the gold standard of treatment is medication, where we actually have a ton of research that shows that medication is just as effective as psychotherapy, or vice versa. In fact, just to give you all an interesting example, what's effective to treat depression or anxiety? People will say, do I need to take a medication? So the amount of benefit that you get from antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication is the same level of benefit that you will get from seeing a therapist, which is the same level of benefit that you get from stopping smoking. Think about that for a second. Smoking in and of itself induces the same level of damage that an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication fixes. So one of the key things that you can do to improve your depression and anxiety is stop smoking. It's crazy. Or vaping. Right? So there are a lot of things that you can do. And we throw medication at the problem. And that's also why, like, we do what we do here at HG. So I'm biased. If I thought medication was the end-all be-all, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be sitting in an office doing 15-minute psychopharm visits, prescribing 4 people medication every hour, and be making $250 per appointment. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's the other problem with our system, is that we tend to financially reward people who prescribe medication. Because you can see volume, baby. 4 patients an hour. It's great. Prescribe so many meds. And so I saw that system, and seriously, there are a lot of good psychopharmacologists out there that are doing a lot of good work. I don't think it's a bad job or it's all nefarious by any means. But part of the reason that we started HG is that's not what I thought people needed. I thought what was missing more than that is when everyone says mental health professionals are overloaded. Yeah, that's because we expect mental health professionals to do a lot of things that are not trained in. Like educate patients. How many hours do you have to educate your patient? Explain to them what depression is. Explain what's happening in your neurochemistry. Explain the effects of diet. Explain all this stuff. You don't have time for that. That's why we built Dr. K's Guide to Depression, Dr. K's Guide to Anxiety. That has diet modules for both of those. That's also why we developed a coaching program. Because one of the key things that I found was that you can help someone in your office, but helping them put together their life so that they have things to be proud of, so that they're making progress in a direction that feels important to them, in order to find out what your direction is, that's worth just as much as therapy, in my experience. And that's what we see with our outcomes. So like what I sort of think is that, treating mental illness is like half the battle, but there's a whole load of other stuff that you can do. So if you're interested, check out coaching. That's why we stream. Aren't people with mental illness kind of past the point of self-help though? Disagree completely. I don't know if you mean self-help as in that is the only kind of help they're getting. But I think that people with mental illness who take agency and engage in self-help do better. Right? So I've had patients who come into my office and are like, therapize me, fix me, make all my problems go away. That's when I do a bad job. In order to do a good job and get good outcomes from therapy, we got to work really hard. And patients especially. The biggest confusing thing, especially about problems like trauma and ADHD, are a sense of helplessness. So let's understand this. When you grow up in a traumatic situation, you try something, and because you can't control your circumstances, let's say you've got an abusive parent, your effort becomes meaningless. I made all these plans to see my friends this weekend, and mom or dad is drunk today, and they just yelled at me and they said, no seeing your friends, screw you. So you begin to learn that my effort is useless. This teaches people learned helplessness. And in the worst cases of trauma, this is what someone is trying to do to you. I've had patients who are smarter and show more promise than their parents. Some parents are proud of this. Some parents are threatened by it. I'll show you who's smart. You think you know better than me? Ho. You don't know better than me. I'm going to prove it to you. And so they will literally try to break the spirit of their kids. This child has a stubborn streak. They need to be taught obedience, is what parents call it. Agency, trying to do something yourself, which some parents will try to literally beat out of their kids. Right? How dare you show initiative? What I want from you is obedience. You should do what I tell you to do, not what you stupidly think you should be doing. Why are you using that part of your mind? How dare you? And so what we teach people is helplessness. We teach them that what you do doesn't matter. Right? And this is like, y'all want to talk about biggest scams of the century. Biggest scams of the century is this idea that politically we don't have any power, at least in the US. They're like, oh, your vote doesn't matter. Do y'all get how brilliant that is? Because the moment that you tell the people who are in power, you have no power, so don't bother exercising it. It's not going to make a difference. Not going to do anything, so why would you? And so then people who have the power take a step back, surrender their power, and then everyone else has a field day with it. So I think that people with who are really struggling with their mental health or mental illness, one interpretation that I just realized is like, you may be past the point of self-help in the sense that helping yourself may not be sufficient. You may need help from an outside source. But I absolutely think that what you put in will determine what you get out. Can I use the guide for ADHD even if I don't have ADHD? I'm always wondering this because autism has some similarities, but it seems to focus on just ADHD. Great question. So I'd say that the ADHD guide is the guide that is the most useful for people who don't have the condition. So the guide to ADHD is guide to ADHD and doing stuff. So I'd say about 30 or 40% of it is ADHD related. The other 60 to 70% is about how our brain decides to do stuff. So how do you organize things? How do you plan things? How do you control your mind? How do you stop it from wandering? How do you focus on one task at hand? How can you train your mind to be one pointed and level up your concentration? All of that is in the guide to ADHD and doing stuff. I also think this is very important because generally speaking, we're seeing a rise in ADHD. And I think in a temporary kind of way, it's not that more people are neurodivergent, but I think that our society fosters ADHD-like symptoms. So the pace of things like technology really increases ADHD-like symptoms. So you should absolutely check it out. Will you ever add a module for autism? Maybe one day. The problem with autism is that it's such a heterogeneous disease that, if you want to call it a disease even, that it's hard because, I've worked with some people who are like nonverbal and don't really interact with the outside world. And then I've worked with other people who are high functioning autism who just struggle kind of in social situations and otherwise live normal lives. And the way to help those two people is very different. Silas Abuser is saying, there is a rise in ADHD, but you guys still make YouTube shorts. Doesn't that contribute to the issue? Sure. So if everyone's attention span is getting worse, why do we make shorts? So there's a really simple reason for that. So we use shorts to try to invite people to watch longer stuff. And short form content can be good. But it's kind of interesting. So if you look at our YouTube performance, our long form videos far outperform our short form videos. So I think it's okay to offer people what they want. And a big part of what we do here at HG, there's a central principle that we've got that upsets a lot of people, which is we meet people where they're at. We don't say, hey, you need to change your attention span and then come watch this long video. We'll meet you where you're at. So if you've got a short attention span, we'll give you short form content. We meet gamers where they're at, which is why we're streaming on Twitch. And sometimes we meet people where they're at, which also sometimes gets us in trouble because some people don't like that we will meet someone who is in a toxic place where they are at. And we're willing to have a conversation with them, even if they're in a bad place, according to some people. But we try to meet people where they're at. And that's kind of, I was talking to someone recently, or just, y'all can check out I was at Miskiff's place. And he was kind of talking about how, he's seen a couple of therapists and, they don't understand him. And I think that's the big problem. It's people don't meet y'all where y'all are at. And that's why when we think about everyone's asking, are your coaches therapists? No, they're not therapists. We try very hard to make them not therapists. Because when we want people who are from the internet, from where y'all are, our coaches come from Twitch chat. And that's what makes them so good, because they understand what it's like to grow up in today's world. And they're taught a set of evidence-based skills that help people make progress in the way that the coaches themselves have made progress. Dr. K meets halfway, sometimes way further than halfway. From a psychiatrist's point of view, is there a best approach for us to see if a therapist will be a good match? The answer is objectively no. It's not a psychiatrist's point of view. There are all kinds of attempts that have been made at therapy matching. So all kinds of studies have been done that said, okay, if you match someone based on demographics, if you match someone based on this quality and this quality, does it improve the quality of therapy? And so far, the tools that we've used to match people have been not very good. So the short answer is you got to try it thus far. So it's very possible with the level of data analytics and AI and things like that we have at our disposal now, that can change. Possible. But thus far, there isn't a good way to tell ahead of time who's going to be a fit and who's not going to be a fit. What should someone do if coaching was counterproductive? I'm really confused about how it could be counterproductive, but let's take your question at face value. I would explore how it ended up being counterproductive. So in a weird way, right? Let's think about it. Let's say your coaching is counterproductive. So whatever ended up happening, if that was counterproductive, you just need to do the opposite and theoretically it'll be productive. I mean, who knows? But I think that even as a therapist or a coach, like doesn't matter, like talking with your clients about, hey, what's working for you, what's not working for you. And with your clients, telling them, having clients tell whoever you're working with, whether it's a personal trainer, whether it's, I mean, I've had yogis that I worked with where I told them, hey, this is not working. What should I do? Right? And either they'll give me a different meditation technique or they'll help me overcome whatever my problem is. So I think in general, if you have a professional who's helping you in any way and something isn't working, you should talk to them about that and problem solve around that. If I get a master's degree in counseling, psychology, and do therapy, what is the advantage of getting a PsyD? So generally speaking, if you look at, so let's understand a couple things. If you look at different degrees and the quality of therapy that they provide, as you correct for levels of experience, basically one degree is not superior to another, I think, last time I checked. So if you look at like an MD may be better at therapy than a clinical social worker, but if they are better than therapy than a clinical social worker, master's in counseling psychology, it's because they've just seen a raw number of patients that's way higher than the master's person, right? And I'm not even suggesting that they are better. I'm just saying if they are better, it's because they've seen more patient volume. Second thing to keep in mind is that the level of training you will get in psychotherapy will be different depending on what kind of degree you get. So speaking of master's in counseling psychology or whatever, you're going to study that for 2 years. Whereas if you get an MD, you're going to learn like very little psychotherapy. So the main thing about PsyD is you'll get more clinical training. And then the other really big thing is that generally speaking, you will earn more money the higher level of a degree that you have. So just across the board. Now, good marketing and cultivating the right patient population can fix that. So if you become really good at your job, irrespective of what your degree is, people will pay whatever you want them to pay. But generally speaking, the compensation changes. Why is depression and bipolar so much harder to treat? So something we know about. Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had a good answer. So I have some ideas, but so we do know that generally speaking, bipolar disorder is a harder condition to treat. Now, there are a couple reasons why bipolar disorder is harder to treat. One is that the neurochemistry may be different. And there's even a movement in psychiatry to suggest that there is no neurochemistry imbalance in something like depression. And if there's no neurochemistry imbalance, then medications aren't very effective. Whereas in bipolar disorder, there may be more of a neurotransmitter or neurochemical imbalance. That's number one. Number two is that for whatever reason, the earlier something happens to you, the worse it is. And bipolar disorder can oftentimes manifest earlier than depression. Number three is that some of the depression in bipolar disorder is your post-hypomanic or post-manic crash. So there is a whole different fuel to it than a standard depression. Because for a long period of time, maybe 1 week to 1 month, your brain has been going in overdrive. So it has to like crash and enter this hibernation phase afterward. that's one of the reasons it could be different. Okay. Do you do any more viewer interviews in the near future? I think so. I think we've got interviews coming up. We did one with a couple last week, which is cool. All right, we've got a couple other questions. Okay. All right, let's take a quick look at this one. All right, how do I stop watching pornography permanently? I'm 17, I live in India, and I'm preparing for an engineering entrance exam to pursue my dream of becoming an astronaut. There are 4 months left, and I had really ruined my preparation by procrastinating in addictions such as video games, pornography, etc. I did get rid of my video game addiction, but pornography, I just can't seem to stop watching it. I've tried the easy peasy method, which I believe is the best possible method to quit pornography, but I've been unsuccessful. I want to get rid of this addiction as soon as possible. Whenever I try to quit, it's just a couple of days until I change my mind and relapse. I'm making this post as a last hope for quitting pornography because I really cannot focus on my studies, and my efficacy drops sharply due to this addiction, which I cannot afford at this period of time. Okay. How to stop watching pornography permanently. The first thing to understand, I want y'all to pay attention to the language. Permanently. Okay? Get rid. Can't seem to stop watching it. I want to get rid of this addiction as soon as possible. I cannot afford at this period of time. So the first thing to understand is that when we get addicted to something, the addiction creates a desperation to fix. I need to fix it now. It needs to be fixed forever. So the goal becomes, how do I fix it permanently? And the moment that we let the desperation fuel our desire to overcome an addiction is the moment we lose to the addiction. Because if it's being fueled by the desperation, what happens when the desperation eases up a little bit? What happens when you have a good day and you feel less desperate? So you are setting up a fuel which will run out. That's the first problem. Second thing to understand is that pornography is primarily an emotional regulation technique. So if we look at the data on pornography and how it affects our brain, people do not watch pornography because they're horny or lustful. This is a common misconception. They're not like the horniest people on the planet. Or horny people can watch a lot of pornography. But people who tend to get addicted to pornography are usually not horny when they watch it. Okay? Different things. What tends to happen is we use pornography for emotional regulation. So the key thing about sexual activity is that sexual activity has a very powerful effect in the brain. So if we look at the purpose of the human brain and body, it is to procreate. Which is why if you look at sort of like fertility and like things like that, like you'll see this situation where if the body can afford to mate, it will, because that's ultimately what the goal is. So you'll even see in some situations like, you know, anglerfish, where the male anglerfish will attach to a female and all of the male anglerfish's organs will atrophy and it will become one giant testicle and pump sperm into the female anglerfish. So we see some highly specialized adaptations based on sexuality. And in the human brain or mind, what we end up doing is sex will override everything else in our head. Okay? And so when sex, like when I'm feeling bad, if there's an opportunity for sex, hey, let's push that out the window because, hey, there's sex. So when we see pornography, it triggers these kinds of changes in our brain. It triggers a strong amount of emotional suppression, And then the other thing is that oftentimes with pornography, there'll be some amount of masturbation, there'll be some amount of orgasm, which will release dopamine and will calm down our hippocampus even more. We also sort of slow down our brain, right? There's post-nut clarity. So there are all kinds of physiologic and neuroscientific changes from watching pornography. But the root of the problem is emotions, usually. Which means if you want to quit pornography due to feeling desperate, you're doomed to fail. Because that desperation is what fuels the pornography. I'm feeling so lost. I'm feeling so helpless. That's when your brain is going to reach for the pornography. So how do you quit permanently? You do not quit permanently. The way to quit permanently is by letting go of the word permanent. You can't be sober for a year. You can be sober today. You can just resist now. So if you really want to conquer this, stop thinking about tomorrow. Stop thinking about a month from now. Stop thinking about all the time that you've wasted. Stop thinking about how important it is that this get taken care of. All of those thoughts are not helpful. And in fact, they are harmful. Regret about the past, negative emotion. Fear of the future, negative emotion. Desperation for change, negative emotion. Negative, negative, negative. Just feeds the pornography. Instead, one really simple thing. Don't watch pornography today. Don't watch pornography now. This moment in time, do not watch. When tomorrow rolls around, don't worry about tomorrow. We're going to worry about today. Not today, not today, not today. Those of y'all who procrastinate, leverage your procrastination. Procrastinate with pornography. I'll watch tomorrow. I'll let myself watch tomorrow. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Keep putting it off. Keep putting it off. Keep putting it off. And as you put it off, other things will start to happen. You won't need it quite as much. You'll start to unwire yourself. Now, a couple of other practical tips. Number one cause of relapse is not actually strong negative emotion. It is boredom. So when you need that spurt of dopamine, your brain will make you bored. If you struggle with pornography addiction and video game addiction and some other kind of addiction, boredom is the problem. Boredom is a dopaminergic craving. So if you want to quit pornography, you better have your day packed. Packed from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. The more you can structure your day, the less vulnerable you will be to pornography. Because pornography squeezes in the gaps, right? I've got 15 minutes. Let me watch some porn. I've got an hour before bed. I'm done with dinner. Maybe I'll game. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to go to sleep yet. Porn. Porn will fill in whatever gap you have. So if you've got a gap in your day, porn will fill it. Second thing to understand. So first of all, don't quit pornography forever. Just procrastinate today. Number two is structure your day as much as you can. Number three is remember that the root of pornography is emotional regulation. As long as you do not have alternate emotional coping skills, pornography will be your default. This is where stuff like meditation works really well, or doing something like seeing a therapist. Things like that. Like you need some way to regulate your emotions because the trash has to be taken out, and porn is really good at taking out the trash. So you got to take out the trash in some other way. Now, the key thing that people trip up with here is that when you try to take out the trash, you have to remember that while you are building a new emotional coping skill, it will be less effective than anything else you do. It will be the biggest waste of time. This is what people miss about emotional coping skills. Any new coping skill, you're going to be level 0, and you're like a level 92 pornography watcher. Your brain knows exactly what's going on, knows exactly what it's looking for, knows exactly where to find it. You even know based on what kind of pornography you watch, right? Depending on what kind of mood you're in, whether you need something a little bit more hardcore, a little bit less hardcore. It's interesting, right? And that's because your brain knows we need a stronger, so this is also interesting. If we look at why pornography is addictive, we need a supernormal stimulus. And a supernormal stimulus is something that is like more than what we're used to. So we see brighter colors, we see 4K, we see surround sound, we see VR. All this kind of stuff is more stimulus, engages our brain more. So if you really want to kick it, you got to procrastinate. You got to pack your day, because boredom is really going to be what screws you. You got to start to learn alternate coping skills. Meditation is probably number one. That's why it's so hard. Okay. Why does all the bad stuff feel so good? What a great question. So in our society today, all the bad stuff is what feels really good. Playing video games, using drugs, pornography, the bad stuff, eating unhealthy food, food that is high in carbohydrates and fat and processed. Why does the worst stuff feel so good? It's because the world that we live in today is so accessible and easy. We have such an abundance of those things. And back in the day when we evolved, the things that made us feel the best were a rarity, right? If you look at calorie density, for example, we used to eat stuff like cassava. I mean, a lot of the world still does, right? We'd eat these different tubers and we'd forage and berries and stuff like that. We didn't have like animal farms. We had to go out and hunt. So there was a very natural balance between our yearning for something and the availability in the world. The reason that life has become harder is because life has become abundant and easy. And the easier it gets, the harder things become for us. When I have food delivery, grocery delivery, I can work remotely. I can always find new friends online. I don't need to leave the house. I don't need to leave my computer. I don't need to learn how to repair relationships because I can just block someone and start talking to someone new. So the easier the world has become, the harder things have become for us. Because when our brains evolved, they evolved in a certain kind of environment where we could not gratify our desires 24 hours a day. It was physically impossible. And so now what's happened is the burden has shifted to us to self-regulate. So we're quickly entering a world where EQ, or emotional quotient, is more important for your long-term success than IQ or your intellectual capability. Self-regulation is what correlates with success, not intelligence. I mean, intelligence does correlate with success, but what we really see is that self-regulation and conscientiousness are very important. And so the reason all the bad stuff feels good is because it didn't used to be bad, because it used to be rare. But now that it's become abundant, it becomes harmful. Sex is not harmful. Food is not harmful. It is the abundance of those things that is harmful. And so what's changed is that the availability has increased, which means we need to be more restrictive to compensate. So we have to evolve as human beings to survive in this world today. Great question. Deeply philosophical. Okay. Next. I don't like people. I spend time alone. I don't like being alone. I spend some time with people. I don't like people. What a great explanation of the problem in the world today. You spend some time alone, you feel lonely. You spend some time with people, you don't like people. So you spend some time alone. It becomes a vicious cycle. And the key thing here is, are you happy? No. So if y'all want to know how to break this cycle, the first thing you've got to understand is that you've got to stop ping-ponging between negative feelings. As long as a negative feeling is driving your behavior, you will be stuck in a cycle. So when I feel lonely, in order to alleviate the loneliness, I'm going to hang out with people. So I'm giving in to the negative emotion. And when I hang out with people, I feel anxious. They're boring. I'm bored. When are we going to get past the small talk? I can't believe these people are talking about this crap. This is how people really spend their day. I don't like this. So then when you feel anxious or bored, you give into that feeling and then you go spend time by yourself. And then the loneliness rises. And you give into that feeling and you go spend time with people. So as long as in life you are ping-ponging between alleviating negative emotions, you will have no control over your life. Because what determines whether you act? It's how you feel. And so you are living a feelings-based life. The problem with feelings is that they come and go. So you will be inconsistent. Because today I'm not lonely, so I'm going to sit at home. And tomorrow I am lonely, so I'm going to go hang out with people. Today I'm feeling anxious with people, so I'm going to go home. You're not in control and you're just bouncing back and forth. And most importantly of all, you are giving in to the negative emotions. And when you give in to a negative emotion, the negative emotion gains power over you. So if you want to break this cycle, what you need to stop doing is socializing because you are lonely. You should socialize for a different reason. But as long as you're looking at emotional satisfaction from socializing, I'm going to get rid of this loneliness. What that fundamentally means is that the loneliness is dictating your behavior. There's also why you get stuck with the same damn ex, by the way. Because what does the ex do? It takes away the negative emotion. That's what they do, right? They're down to hang out. They're down to slip back into old patterns, and they'll at least take away the loneliness. They'll take away the boredom. And so if you want to get control over your life, you want to break the cycle, you've got to stop listening to the loneliness as a reason to act. What do you want from social interaction? Do you want anything except for loneliness or the alleviation of loneliness? And do you want anything from the social activity except for anxiety? Because you have to have a reason, because the problem is that if you give into the loneliness, the moment that a different negative emotion becomes stronger than the loneliness, you'll give into that one, which is why you ping pong back and forth between socializing and being lonely. It's because you're just listening to whichever negative emotion is strongest in the moment. So you'll never build a sustainable relationship that way. So the answer is the same. It's a cycle. And what's the root of the cycle? It's that you're giving into the negative emotion. So you've got two options. Number one is you can manage the negative emotions in other ways. So now it sounds kind of weird, but when people say, oh, I'm lonely, isn't the solution to that to go hang out with people? No. It is a solution, but you can also decompress that loneliness just like any other emotion. You can vent sadness, you can vent anger, you can vent resentment and grief. You can also vent loneliness. Because y'all will know, right, that just being around people doesn't necessarily make you less lonely. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel more lonely. So manage that emotion, whether you want to meditate, whether you want to see a therapist, whatever. Decompress the emotional fuel. Second thing that you've got to do is start socializing for reasons that are not loneliness. Look for something positive as opposed to running away from something negative. Because as long as you're running away, like whatever negative thing happens determines your direction. So really think about, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, how do you want to grow? What are you looking for that's positive that you can move towards? And the more that you find something like that, like, so for example, back when I was lonely, I would focus on like learning particular things from people that I hung out with. So I'm doing this because I want to get better at XYZ. I want to get better at socializing. So it's not about whether I feel good at the end of the day or not. It's, did I practice socializing? I want to learn more about meditation. So I don't have to like these people, but I'm here to like learn about meditation. So I'm going to socialize with them. Right? And this is also how I interact with my homies-in-law. Homies-in-law are the spouses of my wife's friends. And it's like, we're not necessarily friends, but we can still hang out and enjoy what time we spend together because our wives are BFFs. That's what a homie-in-law is. You know? It's great. It's a good relationship. So, that's that cycle. Next up, let's talk about this. Does anyone else have a disinterest in most people? I interact with people a little at work, but I have no desire outside of work. And naturally, those interactions that take place at work aren't that fulfilling. What I love about this 97% upvote rate. Let's go, healthy gamers. Let's go. All right. So if you have difficulty being interested in other people, what do you do about that? So the first thing to understand is that we tend to think of interest as intellectual. This person likes this thing. I like the same thing. Therefore, we will get along and we will be BFFs. But if you are bored with other human beings, it is not a problem of interest. It is a problem of empathy. So I'll explain to y'all how human engagement works. We feel connected to another human being when we share an emotional experience. This is the fundamental foundation of connection. So if we look at babies and parents, especially mothers, we tend to find, and I noticed this as a dad too. So before I had kids, I could watch scary movies. I could watch sad movies. And I was a fucking degenerate gamer. So ain't nothing touch me. There can be gore. There can be loss. There can be sexual assault. Doesn't bother me. I can enjoy whatever. I can enjoy Game of Thrones. It's not too bloody for me. Whatever. No spoilers. Then I had kids. And something weird started happening. I started fucking crying all the time. I'd like be watching some TV show where like two people kiss at the end and I'm like, oh my God. I was like, what the hell is this? I stopped going to movies because I felt really emotional anytime I watched a movie. I was like, what the hell is going on? And that's when I realized, oh crap, I have a 1-month-old at home. And it turns out that the 1-month-old does not know how to communicate. So what does our brain do when we're dealing with a 1-month-old who does not know how to say, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm cranky, I have colic, I need a diaper change, I'm bored, I'm cold, I'm hot, I need a diaper change, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. They have no idea how to communicate all that. So what do you have to do? You have to become a mental map hacker. You have to be able to look at the child and deduce, based on all kinds of weird signals, what's going on with the kid. And how does your brain do that? It ramps up the empathy. So everything that happens in the world around me affects me more. When someone else is sad, I'm sad. When someone else is angry, I'm angry. I got this burst of empathy. And that's what allows you to connect with a child. Because when the child is feeling sad and you feel their sadness and you're like, oh my God, little baby, I'm sorry, darling. I love you so much. I'm so sorry. When you do that, this is what creates a connection between you and someone else. This is also why things like military school and boot camp are transformative for people. Because you go through something that's hard and you do it together. And when you go through something that's hard and you do it together, it tightens the bond. My favorite piece of research on this comes from a study where they had two people meet for a date. And they met in one of two places: a rickety bridge or a stable bridge. And it turns out that if you meet for a date on a rickety bridge, both of y'all feel a little bit more anxious. And since both of you feel it, you bond. Empathy is what creates connection. So if you're disinterested in other people, the reason you're disinterested has nothing to do with your interests. It has to do with your emotional connection to them. So as long as you do not share emotions with someone, you're going to be bored with them. So what do you do about this? Number one reason why we become increasingly disinterested in people is because we suppress so many of our emotions. That is the overwhelming effect of technology, is to suppress emotions. And I'll give you all just a simple example of this. If I go on a date and I'm scrolling on my phone and Reddit is suppressing my emotions, and the person I'm on a date with is scrolling through Instagram and it is suppressing their emotions, there will be no connection because our emotions are all suppressed. We're two people scrolling on our phones. There's no connection there. And so we can't have an emotional connection unless we feel emotions. And generally speaking, our emotions are so suppressed through all of our technological usage that we feel bored with people because there's no connection. So one thing you can do is literally stop using technology for like the hour before you meet someone. And I would spend some time with yourself. Go for a walk, sit and think, do dishes, clean something up, do anything that you can that is away from technology that allows you to like reopen your emotions a little bit. Then you will be primed to connect with them. The second thing that you can do is go towards topics that will evoke some degree of emotion. Right? So this is kind of like playing with fire, but, I wouldn't steer towards politics. But, asking about things that are like emotionally meaningful is good. And that can even be fun stuff like, oh, did you watch the football game that happened this weekend? Are you into that? Or what excites you about the music that you listen to? What's your favorite concert? Right? And then you can like commiserate and you can share some kind of like reminiscing. I really love that concert too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Find some shared ground, but it has to be emotionally shared ground. And if we're emotionally numb, we're going to be bored with other people because like the source of our connection is shut off, like literally, neurologically, it's shut off. So if you're bored with people, people suck more than they used to. So fair enough. But the truth of the matter is chances are it's empathic. It's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of connection. That's what's boring. And as long as we don't have emotional connection, there's just this analytical surface level crap that you can connect with people on, which isn't a real connection. So you're going to be bored. What if I show my passion for things? I'm very emotional about that. Does that help? Absolutely. Provided that you are tuned in to someone else's emotions. So a lot of people struggle with how much should I get excited about the stuff that I'm passionate about? Right? Should I talk about trains for 8 hours straight on this date? Because I love trains. And the answer is you should absolutely talk about things that you're emotional about because like think about it, right? When you hear someone talking about something that they're passionate about, usually it is engaging. When someone else is excited about something, you get excited about it. That's just how human beings work. It's because of our empathic circuitry. The problem with talking about things that we are passionate about is that we can get so caught up in our own emotions that we stop paying attention to other people. And that cuts off empathy. Empathy is about connection. So you want to evoke some genuine emotion and let them play ball. But I would say share a passion and then check in with them. What do you get excited by? Right? I absolutely love Pokemon. What do you get excited by? And then really listen to them. Right? So it's about back and forth. Yeah, got to pass the ball back at some point. That's exactly right. So what we don't want to do is start like talking about what we're excited about and then like peace out on them. And then if we don't connect with them, we don't check in with them. Hey, I'd say like talk about what you're passionate about for between 1 and 3 minutes. If you guys want a rule of thumb, 1 to 3 minutes about something you're passionate about, and then invite them to share. What if the other person talks all the time and I just listen and ask questions occasionally? So here's the big problem that people make. Here's the big mistake that people make when socializing. If you're struggling socializing and you're kind of this person who, like, the other person just talks all the time, and occasionally you'll answer the question, ask a question, occasionally, like, you'll be involved in the conversation, but it's kind of like a monologue with you as, like, some kind of, like, backstage supporter. The main thing that we fail to recognize oftentimes is that if we are struggling in social situations, we may not be doing anything wrong. You got to remember that everyone's social skills suck more than they used to. And there's a decent chance, I would say upward of 50%, that the person that you are talking to is socially incompetent in some way. And you may say to yourself, but they have lots of friends. That doesn't mean that they're not socially incompetent. That just means that they surround themselves with people who are, like, so averse to upsetting other people that they will end up, like, monologuing the whole time and no one will ever call them out on it. So you got to remember that you could be doing stuff right and the person you're talking to could just be socially incompetent, oblivious, arrogant, narcissistic, taking you for granted. Right? And a good example of this is people who always text first. And then you stop texting first. And then they never text back. That's another good example. They're not your friend. Friendship is reciprocal. Right? They're kind of your friend. And so then the question becomes, okay, then how do I find people who are not like this? And this is a key thing to understand. Chances are the people who will be your best friends make you very uncomfortable within the first hour of meeting them. This is the weirdest thing. So our mind prefers that which we know to that which is good. We prefer safe to good. What that means is that if we have been socially neglected, we will select for the person who will socially neglect us because we know how that game is played. I feel comfortable sitting and listening to someone else, and I feel really uncomfortable talking about myself. So if you feel uncomfortable talking about yourself and you meet someone who is a good listener, who is reciprocal and could become a good friend, what happens? You feel awkward because they're actually listening to you. And since you feel awkward, you disappear. You fade into the background. You use your smoke grenade and your invisibility spell, and you use that skill that you do to become invisible. And then you meet someone who's narcissistic, who's happy to talk about themselves, and you're like, ah, yes, this is so much safer. I'm so much more invisible with this person. This person doesn't really even know that I exist, and they don't care that I'm here, which makes me feel safe, but makes me feel lonely. So if y'all are stuck in this situation where you always text people first, or your contribution is like the occasional question or haha or whatever, but you're not a real part of the relationship. If you are in a relationship where you spend a lot more time thinking about them and accommodating them than they accommodate you or think about you, that's not a reciprocal relationship. The way to get out of that is by actually putting yourself, chances are, in places that make you uncomfortable and hanging out with people that you don't quite know what the script is. And tolerate that for a little while and start to pass a little bit back and forth, right? Pay attention to, okay, does this person text me back? Don't wait a year and then see, is this person ever going to text me? Don't wait a year, right? Text them 2 times, 3 times. And if they don't respond after that, move on. That's the other problem, is that we tolerate these people for such a long time that we think it's everyone. It's not everyone. It's just one person for 2 years. That's not everyone for 2 years. So that is everyone for 2 years because you're only hanging out with like one person. Y'all get what I mean? It really makes your sense of probabilities and what percentage of people are like this really lopsided. When you have one like narcissistic friend for 3 years, it dominates your social experience for those 3 years. And this is the other thing. is we're talking about how you find the right friends, but you also have to remember that they are looking for the right friends too. So if I'm a self-absorbed person, what I'm going to do is keep on fishing until I find people who are going to text me first. And then when we meet up, I'm going to talk about myself for an hour. And unless they text me 2 times, 3 times, I'm not even going to hang out with them. And I will surround myself with those kinds of people. So they are fishing for you. And if you really pay attention, what you'll find is early on in the relationship, they will engage with you just as much as necessary to make you habitually their friend. At the beginning, they'll engage, right? They'll be interested in what you're doing. But 1 month later, less interested. 3 months later, less interested. 6 months later, this relationship is now about my emotional needs. Pay attention. It didn't start out that way. It becomes that way. Super challenging. How would you communicate you feel invisible without making it uncomfortable? This is the key problem. You got to feel uncomfortable. You can't avoid feeling uncomfortable. Let's understand, how do you become comfortable with something? Practice. Right? Glasses feel uncomfortable when you first start wearing them, and then you develop comfort. Boxer briefs or tidy whities feel uncomfortable when you first make the switch, and then you get used to it. The solution to discomfort is not avoidance. It is increased exposure. Yo. Yes.
Should we be nice to them?
Yeah.
Be nice to them. It's World Mental Health Day.
Okay. All right. So, questions. We're almost done for the day, but we will be streaming tomorrow. Okay, so what do y'all want to... Let's see what's tomorrow. Okay. Don't need you. Let's see. Okay, so we have an interview tomorrow. So that's good. So check that out. We're going to be interviewing a parent tomorrow, okay? And then on Thursday, we're doing another like post review stream. So we're just going to be chilling with chat on Thursday. Then we're interviewing Destiny on Friday. Couple of other things to keep in mind. One is that today is World Mental Health Day. So if y'all need help with your mental health, please go see a therapist or psychiatrist. And if y'all are interested in more like education or focusing on goals as opposed to like getting treatment for depression or anxiety, definitely check out our coaching program. And then we also have a variety of educational resources, both paid and free. So paid resources are Dr. K's guide because they cost a lot of money to make, and we hire a film crew and a set and all that good stuff. And then if y'all are interested in sort of topics for common problems, check out resource packs. Yeah. And we are going to let's raid Hassan today. Gaming and marijuana addiction. So a couple of things. One is we have a lot of videos on marijuana. So I would definitely check those out. I don't know if we have a resource pack on that, but check out our YouTube channel because we explore that quite a bit. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. K. Learned a lot today. That's why we do it. Jack Joe Jacket, thank you for the feedback. And then, post stuff if you all want questions answered on Reddit. We kind of look through it. I read the Reddit very frequently. K no Uta says, wait. Okay. Says something about if you have ADHD and procrastinate, get it now. No, I mean, get it at your own pace, but sure, it helps. All right, we'll see y'all, ranked anxiety. We'll see y'all tomorrow, okay? So take care, everybody. Are VODs on? I think so.